Like all of the characters in Game of Thrones towards the end, Luis Rubiales is entirely unkillable. He has returned to the news cycle once again, despite the fact that he was banned by FIFA for 3 years, the former president of the Spanish Football Federation, for basically just kissing Ginny Hermoso unconsensually and being a giant weirdo that made everybody uncomfortable and just did a bunch of incredibly uncomfortable things. So FIFA upheld that ban on appeal, and if you're getting banned by FIFA, you know you've done something really wrong. But now he is being investigated on multiple fronts. He's being investigated now for what is essentially corruption, that has to do with the fact that the Spanish Super Cup is being played in Saudi Arabia. Now, this is something that I've made fun of mercilessly. The Spanish Super Cup being played in Saudi Arabia is one of those incredibly transparent money grabs that almost makes you respect how transparent the Spanish Federation is being in its desperation to make as much money as possible. It's the type of move where you start to telegraph your own desperation. Like, instead of having one dating app, you have five, right? You've got 3 different profiles on eHarmony because you don't know which one is going to have the right picture combination, right? You're telegraphing your desperation a little too obviously. They've taken a Sigma grind set to trying to accumulate as much money as possible. And Luis Rubiales was, if you didn't know, responsible for moving the Spanish Super Cup to Saudi Arabia. If you didn't know the Spanish Super Cup was being played in Saudi Arabia, you must have never watched one of these videos before, because I make fun of it literally all the time. But this deal was actually made through Gerard. I don't know why, like, how many different people end up getting paid from this sort of stuff always baffles my mind when we're looking at business deals. Right? But apparently the Spanish Football Federation is not capable of handling this type of negotiation themselves. So they went through Gerard Piqué's company, even though he was, I believe at the time this negotiation was happening like a couple of years ago, he was, I'm pretty sure, still an active player, but they were holding their hands up and saying, "Yo, this was all above board, right? This is all above board. This negotiation is happening." It happened through Gerard Piqué's company, and they struck a deal that essentially paid him over $200 million to host the Spanish Super Cup in Saudi Arabia for 6 years. But there was an audio leak in 2022, so I think that negotiation happened back in 2019. And the audio leak, as reported by ESPN, so we're not talking about, this isn't coming from some tiddlywinks type of source here, leaked audio messages between Piqué and Rubiales detailing the commission involved. And they've been investigating the crime of improper management being committed by Rubiales as he was the president of the Spanish Football Federation. Essentially, this investigation boils down to Rubiales taking more money from the pie than, taking any money from the pie that's not your salary to be the head of the Spanish Football Federation would classify as being, a corrupting force here. It's worth mentioning, because I've dragged Gerard Piqué's name into this, that in this kind of sting that was set up by the Spanish authorities, nobody in Gerard Piqué's company was tagged, but 2 under directors of the Spanish Football Federation were taken into custody. And were discharged from their roles. Obviously, Rubiales is no longer the president of the federation. He resigned. He's actually in the Dominican Republic. To his credit, the only time I'm going to give the guy credit, he said he's willing to cooperate. Not that he has much of a choice, but he said that he's willing to come back from the Dominican Republic because they raided his house in Granada. And anytime you get your house raided, they raided his house and they walked out of his house with a box just labeled Luis Rubiales. Anytime the police are walking around with entire boxes with your name labeled on them, you're probably not sitting in a particularly good spot. But here's the thing. You cannot convince me that this doesn't happen a lot more. Now, they're going after Luis Rubiales like it's the Spanish authorities, because Luis Rubiales is a black sheep at this point. Even FIFA's thrown this guy to one side. Nobody really seems to like him. There were a lot of loyalists in the Spanish Football Federation that stood by him for a long time. But once you kind of get thrown off of your pedestal of power, then he's a pretty easy punching bag. He's also under investigation for actual kind of, sexual assault type charges in Spain. based off of his conduct, particularly around the women's national team. So that is still kind of working its way through the courts as well. So this is a really low-hanging fruit here to be able to catch this guy taking money off the top of these types of negotiations. But I think this is something that's super prevalent just in football in general, that these massive deals, particularly since the influx of Saudi Arabia and Qatar and and the UAE injecting money into the sport like it's a hobby, because it literally is a hobby for them, and moving all of these events to Saudi Arabia and whatever. These people are just, I mean, there's no way there aren't more people taking money off the top. Luis Rubiales is just the person that they're able to catch doing it. Yeah, but Gerard Piqué, his people weren't caught. But the fact that the Spanish Football Federation is this messed up is impressive. The fact that they managed to win the Women's World Cup while everything was this messed up is impressive. Then I wish, honestly, I wish that we were in a situation where it was possible to have a football federation that was not just trying to make as much money as possible, because now the option to make as much money as possible is just to kind of export everything, right? I like the fan protests in the Bundesliga are looking better and better and better, because they're the only thing that's like keeping any sort of faith going in the world. That and like non-league football in England are the two things preserving any faith left. I mean, even in the United States, you've got the MLS destroying what is essentially the US like FA Cup, because they're worried that they don't have control over the monetary levers, and it's fixture congestion and all this nonsense. I'm getting completely distracted at this point, but Luis Rubiales is already a bad guy. He's already been found to be a bad guy. We're just now going through all of the, the documents, going through all of the history of the whole thing, leaking audio tapes about taking basically a kickback for negotiating a deal to move the freaking Super Cup to Saudi Arabia. They also moved it to January, and it's not even the Super Cup anymore. Right, like it's 4 teams instead of 2. It used to be the winner of the league and the winner of the Copa del Rey, and it was like a curtain raiser. It's the FA Community Shield if you're English, right? Or it's the I think they have one in France too. I can't remember the freaking name of it, but they moved it to January, made it a 4-team tournament. These teams in the middle of January have to go play in Saudi Arabia in this 4-team tournament just because. Like, the vibes are incredibly weird on that. It's not even the Super Cup anymore, but that now that Rubiales has been kind of essentially frozen out, they can go through everything else and prosecute this. I mean, this is so prevalent in the game now. I believe that even though the Spanish FA is clearly particularly bad, because they've caught up more, like 2 different directors have been caught up in this investigation. Let me see if I can find who these guys are. Pedro Gonzalez Segura, the director of legal services, and human resources director Jose Javier Jimenez have been suspended, with the federation adding the case has caused very serious damage to the sports image in the country. Yeah, that was already happening. This is just worse. I think that at least Spain's trying to clean it up. At least the Spanish authorities are trying to clean it up. I give them credit for that. But I think this is a really pervasive problem in the sport. How easy it sounds like for these guys to just kind of, on leaked audio tapes, just be like, yeah, okay, we'll get this much money for this deal going through. There's no way there aren't just a ton of other people involved in the sport doing that. And to all the people that say like football's not gone and it's still pure, dude. I don't think there's anything about the top level of the sport anymore that's pure at all. We just have to find a way to enjoy the sport for what we, like for the games that are played on the field. It's almost like you have to enter into a state of cognitive dissonance to watch this sort of stuff now. I mean, Spain, like this is not bad. This reads like, so, this would be some backwater football association. I don't want to name any particular country to like throw shade at them. This is Spain. They've won the men's and the women's World Cup in the last 25 years. If this is happening to Spain, it can literally happen anywhere, dude. You got to keep your FAs honest. All right, see you guys.